Good day. My name is Tyrome Heath. I hope everybody's doing well out there. I'm a history major at Weber State University, and the reason for these PowerPoint slides today is for me to share my senior thesis with everybody out there. The idea behind my senior thesis originates from an old Army depot in my hometown of Ogden, Utah. I've always found a particular interest in this depot and wondered what kind of impact it may have had on both World War II and the Korean War. Today in my slides, I'm going to share a little bit behind my research and my findings regarding the Utah General Depot. To better understand what contribution the Utah General Depot had on the World War II and the Korean War, my research focuses on the strengths, the growth, and the supplies covered over a 12-year period from 1941 to 1953. Our agenda is going to start with a small introduction behind the history of the Utah General Depot. We will then go into the organization within the depot, followed by what impact these organizations had in World War II and the Korean War, and particularly focusing on what lessons were learned over the 12-year period from 1941 to 1953. In order to do this, I had to do a good amount of primary research and also read through a good amount of secondary research documents. How I was able to do this is I first had to find a mentor. I thank Dr. Little within the history department at Weber State University for helping me through this process. I also want to thank the undergraduate research department for giving me a grant. That way I was able to go to Denver, Colorado and go to the National Archives and Records and read through plenty of primary material behind the Utah General Depot. Special collections at Weber State University also helped me additionally with the research behind the Utah General Depot. If you're ever looking to do research, any type of historical research, I would say I would get with them. But I wanted to give a thank you to everybody who helped me along this way to discover what contribution the Utah General Depot had in World War II and the Korean War. With anticipation of war with Japan or even possibly Germany in the 1930s, the U.S. Army decided that they needed to focus on strengthening their home front. The Ogden location for the Utah General Depot was primarily focused on the railways, the roads that ran through Ogden, Utah to the west. Ogden became a gateway to the west, with it being only 780 road miles from San Francisco and about 803 to Seattle, which were both not bad. Again, rail lines stretched to both Seattle and San Francisco, which would be both the ports of embarkation if there was conflict with Germany and Japan. Construction on the site for the Utah General Depot began in 1940. The construction workers had a little bit of interruption due to northern Utah's swampy geography, but production ran through quite quickly. By 1941, in September, engineers started distributing and producing equipment within their warehouse to be distributed to the various depots in the West. The Utah General Depot was very strategically important to the Army due to its location in the West. The West is very vast and hard to get across, and there's only a few rail lines that run across it, one being the one that sits in Ogden, Utah. Ogden, Utah gets a nickname as the Junction City due to that. And these junctions led all the way to Seattle, San Francisco, and many of the important embarkation ports that the Army needed to get these supplies across to troops. As war with Japan began, immediately the importance of the Utah General Depot became into play. Although they only had 850,000 square feet of space, This space was very vital for the war effort moving forward with Japan and Germany. The Utah General Depot was made up of 5 branches within the Army, and all of them supplied much of their material here at the Utah General Depot. These branches included the Quartermaster Corps, the Engineer Corps, the Single Corps, Adjunct General Corps, and the Chemical Corps, all hosting a bunch of various material, equipment, and supplies needed to help the troops fight the war. This was a fight on the home front, and these organizations took their job with a lot of pride. The Utah General Depot was very important due to the aerial threats to the western depots during the early war. After Pearl Harbor, many of the cities such as San Francisco and Seattle thought they may be attacked too, and much of the supplies needed to get to the Pacific Theater from the east coast of the United States. Many of the rail lines became very hot as supplies moved through to help the troops in World War II. Steel helmets, rations, and PPE, personal protective equipment, was sent through the Utah General Depot to the West Coast depots to be then embarkaded to the various troops fighting across the Pacific Theater. The Chemical Corps had toxic gas masks, stored flamethrowers to help contribute to the troops, as well as the Single Corps with rations of radios, tubes, coils, fuses, and switches to help fight the war. By the outbreak of the Korean War, the Utah General Depot had increased its storage size to 5,322,000 square feet versus the 850,000 square feet they originally had in World War II. Immediately in the Korean War, it became the Utah General Depot was a very important piece to fighting on the home front, as this war was totally focused in the Pacific Theater. Much of the supplies had to move from the east to the west coast to be embarkaded, and they moved through the Utah General Depot. Personnel size increased from 2,774 in June of 1950, and by February of 1951, not even 7 months later, there would be 4,282 employees hired on. This is a 54% increase due to the amount of material and equipment that was moving through the depot. In the early months of the war, in the Quartermaster Corps, line items increased from 35,000 to 60,000, and the Utah General Depot became an important piece in the puzzle of fighting this war across foreign seas. Through the 12 years that the depot operated in 2 wars, there was much experience gained. One gentleman on the forefront of this experience gained was Elmer Ward. He grew up here in Utah, attended Utah State, was a phenomenal football player, went to the NFL, was drafted by the Detroit Lions. At the outbreak of war, he decided to serve his nation, became a 2nd lieutenant in the United States Army. He was branch quartermaster, and following a successful career during World War II at the General Depot, he got out of the Army. He was hired as the chief of the management office during the Korean War, and he ended up learning a lot of experience in the logistics behind managing such an amount of supplies. He decided to write a management handbook and became one of the forefronts to helping the Quartermaster Corps in the Army grow with experience. His handbook was handed out to various managers and also many Army personnel. That way other depots could learn to be as productive as the one at Ogden, Utah. The Utah General's Depot's main contribution must be credited to its strategic location within the United States. Because it is one of the few railways that run through this section of the U.S., and both of the wars were focused in the Pacific theater with the war against Japan and the war against Korea, much of the supplies traveled through this vital junction. The Utah General Depot's history should be preserved due to the fact of its contribution during the war, and I'm very happy about the findings I was able to find during my research of the Utah General Depot. In conclusion, the history behind the Utah General Depot is a very interesting one. One could say without the Utah General Depot, it would have been hard for the troops to be supplied overseas due to a strategic location of many of the supplies traveled from the eastern United States coast through the Utah General Depot to be spread out across the western depots and then to distributed to overseas to the troops fighting. The Utah General Depot was a very vital piece of the war effort on the home front. Here are the references behind the research I have completed. You will be able to find my complete paper in the special collections in the following fall semester of 2020. I'd like to thank everybody's time and hope that everybody stays safe. And thank you to all those who contributed to this research. Have a good day. Bye.